together sort of lists of who would be interesting people, and we came up with this distinguished set of 4, and then realized it was sort of a panel. So we put together a panel, and here's why.
We're not really a panel, we're just sort of a panel.
Awesome people into the day, and we were like, oh, it's kind of a panel. So the idea here is that Jenna is going to paint, and Jenna, remember from this morning, is Wdqi, and they have been a great partner and friend forever, and have produced many of the reports that you've undoubtedly seen. In fact, we talked about some of them this morning, and I'll go set them out. When you start talking, I'll go set them out.
Sure.
Is that okay? Okay. And so I'm sure that you'll be interested in those. And so we're really glad to have her here today to talk a little bit about kind of the landscape, the lay of the land. What are states doing? How are they progressing in the world of data? And also, what are some of the changes that we're seeing in terms of how they could collaborate and connect, and how they could learn from each other? And then we have Patrick. And it's so funny, I don't know why we haven't connected before, but it was so great. Patrick called up after 2 years, at least, of coming to these conferences where people said, well, are there any examples of really good partnerships, really good collaboration, data sharing across states? And everyone said, Wdqi. So we invited Patrick, and so we're super glad that he's here to talk a little bit about that. And it turns out that the Wdqi partnerships have been expanding dramatically. So I think that's where he's going to sort of focus his comments. And then just last month, I was at the Wdqi fly-in, and learned that Cynthia and Yvette had done a study commissioned by the Department of Labor, and we have their Federal Private Program Officer here. Thanks for coming, Wayne. And they had done a study to look at the capacity of LMI shops in terms of being able to conduct research and use some of the systems and some of the data that the Wdqi systems are sort of getting together. So that's where we'll spend the next hour investigating those things. And so I'm thrilled to have them all here. Thanks so much.
I'll get started. I think this shouldn't be a surprise to any of you, kind of given the current political landscape with the new administration shift, and given the fact that a lot of the grants that brought you all here today are coming to a close. There's been a push now. Basically, a lot more is happening at the state, and the drive is really at the state level to get things done. So, we're in a contentious budget period. We don't know, how much money will be designated to data grants in the future. We also don't really know what the fate of kind of programs like TANF and SNAP are going to be moving forward either. It could turn out one way or the other, but I think this kind of brings me to the point of, I think more than ever, it's just essential that we use the state data that we've been building up with the shift. You guys can use it to argue for, we can take these up. Excuse me, I'm so tired. Telling everyone about all the wind last night. Kept me up. So we can use this as an argument to maintain all of the programs that might lose funding. Say, look at these programs. We have evidence about how they're working and how they're helping the people in our state to gain economic independence. So when there start to be arguments about getting rid of these programs or decreasing their funding, you can use your data for that. We can take best practices up to the federal level and institutionalize them. And oftentimes when states sort of lack capacity, we're able to give more information about it. So an example I wanted to bring up is most of you probably don't know much about the apprenticeship programs in your state unless you're running them. It tends to be a little bit of a black hole. So Michigan actually recently published an apprenticeship report. They got their hands on federal apprenticeship data for their state, and now that state has an idea about the apprentices in their state. And you guys can draw from that. You can kind of extrapolate something that Michigan did and take it for yourselves. So that's why I think this push is really important. And there's also been a push lately, I'm seeing it more and more. There's so many partnerships going on, and the rest of the panel is going to talk a little bit more about this. But I've seen a lot of involvement with foundations. The states are increasingly getting money from foundations, and they're doing important work that can't necessarily be done just with state or federal funding. There's a couple of really great examples of this. Arkansas, I want to say maybe a year or so ago, they put out this TANF report, and it looks at the differences between people in their career pathways kind of initiative versus just plain old TANF participants, and it shows that there actually is an earnings difference. And that report was foundation funded, right? Yeah, Jake is nodding if he's feel free to talk more about it, but that's something that the state may not have been able to do without this foundation funding, and so it's a source that we encourage you to look at as maybe you're facing challenges in other respects, as you can find foundation help. In Rhode Island, there's another really innovative program through Brown University. They have a RIPPLE, it's called the Rhode Island Innovative Policy Lab, and it's actually funded by the Arnold Foundation. So they fund Brown University to basically have the capacity that Rhode Island doesn't have. So when a state agency doesn't have the capacity to do something, Ripple is able to do the research and help figure out the policy programs. Recently, Rhode Island was working on defining dislocated worker to dole out some of their funding for those purposes, and they kind of hit a stumbling block, and they worked with Ripple, and Ripple did some analysis, and together they came up with a really good definition. And so those are the ways that foundations are helping you as states improve, and kind of something that we encourage you to look at as another method of getting what you want done. Industry organizations, we're seeing a huge push towards people working with industry organizations. I think the ultimate example of this is the industry certification, the Project of Certification Data Exchange. It's being run through ACT, the Association of Career and Technical Education. They're expanding data linkages between state longitudinal data systems, including information about industry certifications. Industry, they benefit from this data, and they want to help. They can learn where there's a skills gap or where they're going to find the workers that they need. And so industry is another partnership that we encourage you to make use of as you're thinking about this. And then most finally, within your states, there's the data users, there's the legislature. These relationships are essential. And I think Pat was going to talk a little bit about this, correct me if I'm wrong. But he can, he doesn't have to. Mississippi, NEMO is a great example. You have a culture that really values data in your state, and that's because you have a great relationship with the legislature. They understand that when they have a question, they can look to you for answers. And when you have that relationship in your state, it's just an essential version of support. It helps keep your funding up. You know, we don't want to talk too much about funding, but it is a reality that you need funding to continue your work. And when you have a strong relationship with your legislature and they understand what they can get from you, they're much more likely to give you that state funding in addition to whatever you receive at the federal level. And data users, what you do doesn't have to stay in a black hole. You're capable of producing interesting research, interesting consumer tools for legislatures, and so you can do outreach to those organizations. I know Minnesota, they have a targeted outreach program. They reach out to students and they reach out to researchers and they say, we have this data, do you want to use it? Other times, there's a lot of, I'm seeing a huge push towards scorecards now, so this is consumer information geared towards high school students that are looking into their post-secondary options and trying to decide, do I want to go to a 2-year school, do I want to go to a 4-year school, maybe a short-term training program is best for me, and there's a whole wide world out there that these students don't know much about. And so I think even in the past couple of months, I've seen 5 or 6 bills that would produce this consumer information. It would create a website that says, here's your options, here's this institution, here's the majors, here's how much money you can make if you attend this institution and partake in that program, here's the percentage of past graduates that are employed, and it really helps students make that informed decision as they embark upon that confusing time in their lives where they have no idea what to do. And so it's important to reach out to students and let them know if your state has something like that, we can help you, you don't have to be lost forever. It's really the biggest push I'm seeing. So I think, just in sum, it's really important to build up your relationship with your stakeholders, your legislators, your students, your researchers. You can do that through your typical sort of outreach, reaching out one-on-one, advertising, industry organizations, and then foundations are a great source for you. They're going to help you get the data you need, get the capacity that you need, and someone we encourage you all to work with. I'm happy to sort of take questions later, but I don't want to spend forever kind of telling you things you may or may not already know.
Does it make sense to just continue and then take questions all the way at the end? Does that work for people? Does that work for people? Okay.
Or if you have questions in the middle and something doesn't make sense, we'll get out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's that kind of question, yeah.
Okay, so Again, I'm Patrick Lane. I'm from the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. So it sounds like I should be across the hall, but I'm not. I'm here. Wdqi, thank you, and I feel very welcome. So, Wdqi is a Western-focused organization that has our roots. We go back to the 50s and do a lot of stuff in the higher ed world, and oddly enough, in the mental health world. Not for staff particularly, but broadly speaking for workforce development in the West. We started working on data issues in earnest about, I guess, 7 or 8 years ago now, and convened a meeting of our member states, which, as I said, are in the West. They go from about the Dakotas out to, at this point, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas. So we have a big service area. We're taking over the world. And the questions we posed to them are, what are the challenges as these new data projects that you're all working on, these are developing, what do you want to talk about at the regional level? And the thing that we heard very clearly was that the data systems had potential to be terrific, but they were going to miss a big swath of the population. People who cross borders for school, people who cross borders for employment, people who live in one state and work in another. That was early on, everybody recognized that as a huge gap. So based on that, we got a chunk of funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to run a pilot project. And we convinced 4 states in the West, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Hawaii, to engage in a project to see whether it's feasible to share data across state lines. You're all probably not experts on Western geography, but there's precisely one metropolitan area in the West that really straddles a state line. That's Portland and Vancouver, Washington. You guys, okay. All the other cities in the West are either on the coast or in the middle of the state, like Denver's in the center of Colorado, LA, and Southern California are all on the coast. But in spite of that, there still was problems that the state folks recognized. So we had those, Washington and Oregon were key participants. We wanted to add Idaho as well because there are and have been in existence for a long time bilateral sharing agreements. There are many examples of individual states that have gotten together and worked to share data with a single partner. And then we added Hawaii, mainly because it's a great place to go for meetings. This was under the previous project leadership, so we like to go there, I guess. But they are continuous. They're all separated by small bodies of water. And the key questions that we looked at are, A, whether you can actually find additional data on people who've left your state, and B, whether it makes a difference. Do we, as researchers, have effectively a reasonable sample just within our own state, or are these people who are leaving, does that affect the analyses that are important to us in education and workforce development? So in the pilot, we found that yes, we can in fact find people. If you just look at the percentage of people that are found in a state after college graduation, it's a simple metric. In Idaho, they were missing about 45% of their graduates just after graduation. Just adding these other 3 states, we were able to knock out about a fifth of that uncertainty. So it's 9 percentage points, I think, is the final number. And then the question is, so, that's great, good work, does it matter? And when we looked at it by program, it does in fact matter. They're doing analyses, looking at trying to produce more graduates in a particular field. And I think it was Washington. I should have studied up on this since I was going to be talking about it and you'd be on the panel. But in the health field in particular, the people who are leaving the state were earning significantly more working in Idaho and working in Oregon. We didn't get into the reasons for that. This was really a pilot and demonstration project, so we didn't explore those sort of policy implications, but it convinced us that there was that we had to do more work. So we went back to the Gates Foundation and said, we did it. Now can we try to make this something that's sustainable, that's built for the long haul, and that really includes the rest of the country, where there is in fact a lot more migration. So they said yes, and they gave us more money to really expand the exchange and to build it into something that can be used on a continual